JavaScript statements are often called a combination of many things. So to begin with, let's understand what a computer program is. It's nothing but a set of instructions to be executed by a computer. In a programming language, these instructions, we call them as statements. And a program is nothing but a list of statements. Now, a statement will have values, operators, expressions, functions, methods, keywords, and comments. So an example of a statement is whatever we've typed in each line. Each line of your JavaScript statement, which ends with a return or a semicolon, is called a statement. Now, there are conditional statements and which actually perform something where, let's say, if you're older than 18, then you are allowed to do something. If you're younger than 18, then you're not allowed to vote, something like that. And also, let's say there are certain things that require more than one condition. Let's say if you're 18 and if you also are a major in mathematics, then you can take up a data science course at a university. So in those cases, else if is used. So if you're 18, you are allowed to take a particular course. Else, if you know statistics, let's say, then you can take up our data science course. Else, you're more than welcome to take a programming in full stack course. So something like that. So just an example. We'll see this in code soon that will make it a lot more clear. Then there is something called as a switch. A switch is depending on a particular case, and if a case works in a particular way, then you execute your code, otherwise you break. And I'll give you a better example than this is, but these are all the syntax. This is the syntax for conditional statement, which includes if, else, if, and else, and then this is for switch. So we'll talk about more in detail, and there's also something I want to introduce you to is camel case. A camel case is heavily followed in JavaScript, and that's an example of it. Just so you know, for now, we'll be going more in detail later, but for now, just to understand that camel casing is followed as standard practice across JavaScript, and let's look at some examples. Okay, and I'm going to move over to JavaScript, JSBin, and let's say what is a program. A program, something which is a list of statements. So this is declaring a variable is a statement. At the same time, I'm going to declare a few variables like this. This is a statement, and if I say this too is a statement. All right, now if I say console.log and print this out, this becomes a program. Okay, let's print this and say value from the program is 30. Now, something to do with the semicolon. So I can just choose to not give it a semicolon, but the ideal practice is if you're choosing to give it to a semicolon across your code, then please do so in your entire code lineup. Otherwise, you will still be depending on semicolon, especially when you're using your conditional statements or your for loops. And it's important. I would recommend that we use these colons as much as possible, unless it's a really single or a few line script and nobody's going to read it much often, but those cases are really rare. All right, now I'm going to log this and see how this works. So it's printing 40. That's great. So also there's another way of semicolons. Okay, now if I say give it a value like this, and I'm declaring more and more variables in the same line, and that's how we give semicolons. I'm also performing a mathematical operation all in a single line, and also print this. all of this in a single line, and that is also okay, although not a recommended practice. JavaScript makes use of white space really heavily. So for example, if I do something like this, it's also a good practice. I mean, it's also accepted, but not a good practice. Something like this, and I do a console.log that prints 65. But this is not a good practice. What is a recommended standard good practice for white space? This is a good practice. So when we declare a variable, we give it a space. Every letter of importance gets its own space, its own value, and it looks so much better. So this is a better way of uh, giving space, and I clear this and run it, and it returns the value. And similarly, I'm sorry, we didn't print this, but this is a better way. And I can also do a line break like this. So if I do a variable O equals, and then I hit return and hit 2 tabs, I could do something like this as well. You know, this is also, you can just go on and on. I just want to make sure I have those variables in place. And let's say I do a plus again, I come back here and do something like this and type a semicolon here. Notice if I run this, it will not give me any error. This is also accepted, but this is called, you make sure you comment that you're creating a line break, because you do it at times because your variables that you're declaring is if it's really long, then you do give it line breaks. Then there is something called as a code block. Code blocks are nothing but functions, usually functions, but a code block is a block of code. They're interdependent of each other. I mean, they cannot function on their own, and they belong to a block. For example, I create a function. We'll go over functions separately, but this is just a simple introduction. I'm going to create a function in camel cases, and then let's say this is what it is, and I create a declare some variables. Okay, I'm creating a function that will add 2 numbers, and then I have some variables. Okay, and that's my function, and it also prints. So here is what it is trying to do, and every time I console log, it does this. So now what will happen if I call upon this function, and when I do, it prints 30, because 10 plus 20 is 30, and this whole thing is called a code block. So I hope you're clear now what a statement is, what a program is, and what a semicolon is, and how white space works. I do recommend us all to follow a standard process which the world follows amongst JavaScript developer community. And let's go more deeper in statements in the next session. See you around.